Why are you exhausted when you haven't even done what matters yet? You open your eyes, and before your mind can even finish waking up, it's already hijacked. Messages, updates, noise. Before you've spoken to yourself, the world has already spoken to you. And you respond, without thinking, without choosing, without clarity. You call it normal. But deep down, you know something feels off. You know you're spending too much time explaining yourself, justifying your silence, defending your decisions, waiting for the right moment, the right approval, the right signal to go after what's already yours. But the more you talk, the less you act. The more you explain, the less you believe. And the more you perform, the further you drift from what you really value. Because here's the truth. Most people don't lack drive. They lack direction. And that's not because they don't want more. It's because their attention is owned by everything but themselves. You felt it. That fatigue that doesn't go away with rest. That frustration that creeps in even after a productive day. That lingering sense that you're doing a lot, but not going anywhere meaningful. You're tired because you're overexposed. You give away your time, your opinions, your focus to people who aren't invested in your outcome. You manage what others think instead of managing what actually moves your life forward. And slowly, that becomes your reality. You react to life instead of leading it. We were not built for constant input, and we're definitely not wired to perform under constant noise. The moment you try to build anything meaningful, peace, clarity, vision, it gets drowned out by distractions that feel urgent but mean nothing. And that's where you're losing the game. Not in effort, not in discipline, but in attention. Because no matter how good your plan is, if your focus is weak, your results will be too. And every time you start explaining yourself, sharing your plans too early, asking for validation that shouldn't be necessary, you scatter your own power. You leak progress before it's even built. It's not about hiding. It's about protecting what matters. Not everything needs to be spoken. Not everything needs to be posted. Not every thought needs feedback. Sometimes the most powerful move is to stay silent, stay focused, and move forward without interruption. That silence. It's not weakness. It's strategy. And more than that, it's leadership. Because when you learn to guard your energy, you learn to guide your life. This stops the moment you stop giving your attention to noise and start giving it to results. In this video, we're going to break down why external noise is killing your clarity and momentum, how silence, when used intentionally, becomes your most powerful tool, what you must stop doing immediately to rebuild your ability to focus, and how Covey's timeless principle of first things first becomes a weapon in the age of distraction. Because this isn't about avoiding the world, it's about choosing yourself. It's about remembering that your mind is a garden, not a marketplace. That your day should begin with your vision, not someone else's urgency. That your energy should be a resource invested, not a commodity wasted. You don't need more motivation. You need to stop giving your energy to things that are beneath your future. You need to create space, mentally, emotionally, practically, to return to what matters. To the goals that don't trend online. To the values that don't depend on applause. To the actions that may never be seen, but will change everything. When you begin building in silence, you start strengthening the most important kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. You act without waiting for permission. You align your life without seeking applause. You move with purpose, not noise. And yes, it's hard. It's uncomfortable. You'll be tempted to explain, to share, to look for reassurance. But don't. Because the results you want won't come from being understood. They'll come from being consistent. You've tried the loud route, the reactive path, the explanation game. Now it's time for something better, quieter, stronger, more effective. If you're ready to stop explaining and start executing, subscribe now and stay with me until the end. Because this silence you've been avoiding, it might be the foundation you've been missing all along. You keep wondering why you're stuck, why your plans never take off, why your days feel full but your progress feels empty. It's not a lack of ambition. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of alignment. Your actions, your thoughts, and your attention are not working together. They're working against each other. This is where most people fail. They don't fail because they don't care. They fail because they never stop long enough to realize how far they've drifted from what actually matters. They stay in motion, replying, reacting, consuming, planning, but never pausing to ask the question that changes everything. Is this the most important thing I could be doing right now? Covey called this living by default. It's when your life is shaped more by urgency than by purpose. When your time is filled with what's loud instead of what's meaningful. When you're spending your energy reacting to the demands of others instead of investing it in what matters most to you. The truth is, clarity doesn't come when everything is visible. It comes when you remove what doesn't belong. The same applies to your focus. You don't gain power by doing more. You gain it by removing what drains you. And that's where silence enters. Not as an escape, but as a filter. Silence is not about isolation. It's about intention. It's the tool you use to reconnect with your core priorities, to hear your own voice above the noise, and to get brutally honest about where your attention is going and where it's being wasted. Because if you're honest, much of your attention today is not yours. It's being pulled, hijacked, scattered. Every time you check your phone out of habit, respond to something meaningless, or explain yourself to someone who wasn't even asking, you're giving away a piece of your future. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the presence of clarity. It's the decision to stop explaining and start observing, to listen before responding, to choose with intention rather than react from pressure. In a noisy world, silence is an act of rebellion and responsibility. But let's be even more specific. What does this look like in real life? It means saying no to the quick reply when your focus is needed elsewhere. It means closing the tab that pulls you away from your long-term goals. It means starting your day not with other people's updates, but with your own direction. It means pausing before you say yes to anything and asking, does this move me toward the life I said I wanted or distract me from it? And this isn't just motivational talk. It's principle-based action. When you focus your energy on what matters most, everything in your life begins to reflect that focus. Your results become more consistent. Your time becomes more meaningful. Your confidence grows, not because someone else validates you, but because you start living in alignment with what you actually believe. This is the essence of leadership, not of others, but of self. You can't lead your life if you don't first take ownership of your attention. You can't build momentum if your energy is constantly being fragmented. And you can't claim results if your actions are being directed by everyone but you. That's what Covey taught so clearly, that private victories precede public ones. You don't need to convince others you're serious. You need to convince yourself. You need to live in a way that your results can't be denied, not because you told the world, but because you showed up when no one was watching. That's the shift. When you start treating your attention as a sacred asset and not a public resource. When you stop performing and start practicing. When you stop reacting and start building. Every time you choose silence over noise, focus over urgency, alignment over pressure, you're making a deposit in your future. Not a loud one, not a glamorous one, but a powerful one. So here's the real question. If your attention shaped your entire life from this point forward, where would that life take you? Because whether you realize it or not, it already is. You've probably heard the phrase, put first things first. It sounds simple, almost obvious. But when you really look at your day, your habits, your decisions, how often are the first things actually first? Covey didn't just use that phrase as a productivity tip. He positioned it as one of the cornerstones of personal leadership, the bridge between knowing your values and actually living them. To put first things first is to live with discipline rooted in clarity. And clarity starts with focus that's chosen, protected, and renewed every day. But here's the disconnect. Most people know what matters. They know what would move their life forward. They've written it down, talked about it, maybe even scheduled it. And yet, they don't follow through. Why? Because knowing what matters isn't the problem. Giving it your full attention is. The modern world doesn't fight your values directly, it erodes them quietly through distraction, through urgency disguised as importance, through demands disguised as connection, through the illusion that being busy is the same as being effective. That's why Covey made a critical distinction between what's important and what's urgent. Urgent things shout. Important things wait. Urgent things demand. Important things require intention. And if you don't decide which is which, the world will decide for you, and it won't choose wisely. When you start your day with the urgent emails, alerts, replies, interruptions, you enter someone else's priorities. But when you begin with what Covey called quadrant 2 activities, things that are not urgent but deeply important, you start leading your life instead of reacting to it. And this is where silence becomes essential, not as a moment of escape, but as a strategic environment for choosing what matters most. Because you can't hear your deeper priorities if your mind is always in conversation with noise. You can't align your time with your values if you never pause long enough to reflect on them. Covey taught that effectiveness doesn't begin with action. It begins with clarity. And clarity requires space. Not physical space. Mental space. Emotional space. The kind of space where you're not reacting, performing, explaining, or absorbing. The kind of space where you can simply see your life clearly, then act with precision. But for most people, that space doesn't exist because it's been filled with noise. Every spare moment becomes a scroll. Every thought becomes a notification. Every decision becomes a negotiation with the opinions of others. And then they wonder why their goals feel distant, why their confidence wavers, why their plans never seem to get off the ground. Covey wasn't just teaching principles, he was teaching how to think in alignment with who you want to become. And that requires a different relationship with silence, a different relationship with your own time, a different standard for what earns your focus. This is where discipline meets vision. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need more motivation. You need to decide, once and for all, that your energy is not up for grabs, that your direction will not be outsourced, that your time belongs to the future you're building, not to the noise you've been tolerating. Covey believed that private victories are what make public victories sustainable, and private victories are born in silence. They're built in the choices you make when no one's watching. They're forged in the moments when you feel like explaining yourself and don't, when you feel like reacting and stay calm, when you feel like quitting and choose to show up anyway. That's personal leadership, not flashy, not loud, but unshakable, because it's not dependent on applause. It's not conditional on outcome. It's built on principle, and principles don't change when the mood does. When you lead yourself this way, silence stops being uncomfortable. It becomes productive. It becomes powerful. It becomes your reset, your advantage, your edge. You begin to realize that what seemed like loneliness was actually clarity in disguise. That what felt like boredom was actually space to hear what matters. That what looked like invisibility was actually incubation, the quiet development of strength before it becomes visible. Covey's principles weren't about speed. They were about direction. And in a world obsessed with doing more, saying more, sharing more, your greatest strength might be doing less, choosing better, and staying silent while you build what matters. Because when you do, your energy shifts, your calendar aligns, and your life begins to reflect what you said you valued all along. This is not theory. It's a choice. And the power to make that choice? It's already yours. Clarity without action is just a good feeling. It inspires for a moment, but nothing changes. What transforms your life isn't what you know, it's what you consistently do with what you know. And that's why so many people stay stuck. They hear the right message. They even agree with it, but they don't translate it into action. Not because they don't want to, but because they never created a system that turns values into movement. So let's get practical. If you want to take back your focus, stop scattering your energy, and build in silence, you don't need to change everything. You need to install a few small habits that act as anchors. Simple actions. Repeatable patterns. Daily decisions that reinforce your identity and protect your progress. It starts in the first hour of your day. Before the world tells you who to be, you decide who you're going to be. No notifications. No inbox. No news. Just 60 minutes where your time, your mind, and your choices belong to you. Wake up, hydrate, move your body, read something that sharpens your mind. Then, without distraction, ask yourself, what matters most today? Write it down. 2 or 3 things. Not 10. Not a whole schedule. Just the priorities that reflect your deepest values, not just your surface-level tasks. This is your personal version of Covey's first things first. You're not doing what screams the loudest. You're doing what matters most. Then, when you sit down to work, eliminate all inputs that don't serve the outcome. One task at a time. Notifications off. No browser tabs with distractions. No background noise unless it sharpens your focus. Silence isn't just peace, it's a productivity tool. Block time for deep work. That means time with no interruptions. No calls. No emails. No meetings. And let people around you know, during these 90 minutes, I'm unavailable. I'm doing what moves the needle. You'd be shocked how much progress you can make in just 90 focused minutes when you stop multitasking your life away. Next, set boundaries around your energy, not just your time. It's easy to think productivity is about squeezing in more tasks. It's not. It's about protecting what fuels you. That means saying no more often. Not because you're rude, but because your future is worth protecting. If something doesn't align with your goals, your peace, or your purpose, it doesn't belong in your calendar. Stephen Covey often emphasized the gap between urgency and importance. So here's a practical way to close that gap. Each evening, look at your to-do list. Then ask, which of these tasks move me closer to the future I want? Which ones just maintain the present I'm trying to outgrow? The first list? Those are your priorities. The second? Those are distractions wearing a disguise. Be honest. Delete what doesn't serve you. Reschedule what isn't urgent. Protect your direction, even when it's inconvenient. Now let's talk about your digital life. If your phone is the first thing you touch in the morning and the last thing you see before bed, don't be surprised if you feel scattered. Build tech boundaries. Start with these 3. No phone during the first hour of your day. No social media apps on your home screen. 1 digital detox day per week. No posts, no scrolling, no content. Just life. You'll realize something quickly. You were never missing out. You were missing yourself. Finally, practice the discipline of not sharing everything. That new idea you're excited about? Don't post it, build it. That new habit you're starting? Don't announce it, do it. Let the results speak. Let the silence hold space for transformation. Covey believed that discipline was not a restriction, it was freedom through structure. When you give your energy a structure, your life gains direction. And when you repeat the right behaviors long enough, you no longer have to force success, you start to attract it. Remember, systems beat willpower. And focus is a system. It needs habits, not just motivation. Silence is a habit. Saying no is a habit. Choosing depth over noise is a habit. Stack those habits. Build your system. And soon, you won't just feel more focused. You'll become someone who doesn't need noise to feel progress. Because you're no longer proving anything. You're building everything. Be honest. How many days have you ended feeling exhausted, but unable to point to anything that really moved your life forward? You checked boxes. You replied to people. You were productive. But deep down, you weren't really present. You weren't really building. You were busy managing noise. That kind of exhaustion doesn't come from effort. It comes from misplaced energy. It's not that you don't have enough time. It's that too much of your time is being consumed by things that don't deserve it. Not just distractions like your phone or social media, but mental clutter, emotional clutter, the constant need to explain, to prove, to be seen, to respond, to stay available, even when it costs your peace. And the worst part is, you've normalized it. You tell yourself this is how life is now, that everyone's overwhelmed, that being stretched thin is just part of adulthood. But that's not true. That's not life. That's a pattern of disempowerment you've learned to tolerate. Look closer. The days you feel most alive, The days you actually respect yourself are not the ones filled with notifications and noise. They're the days when you move with purpose, when your actions align with your intentions, when you feel in control, even if only for a few hours. But how often do you create space for that to happen? You become so used to reacting, you've forgotten how to choose. You become so used to performing, you've forgotten how to protect your peace. And slowly, your identity has started to blur. Not because you don't know who you are, but because you rarely give yourself enough silence to remember. Here's the hard truth. You're becoming whatever gets your attention most often. If your day is shaped by notifications, shallow content, other people's demands, and the constant urge to explain yourself, don't be surprised if you feel lost, anxious, and scattered. That's not a personality issue. That's a focus issue. That's what happens when your environment becomes your compass. When your energy is directed outward before it ever has a chance to go inward. Covey warned against this. He called it climbing the ladder of success only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. And most people don't realize it until years have passed. Until the cost of distraction becomes visible in wasted potential, shallow relationships, fragile confidence, and work that never meant anything. You don't need more inspiration. You need a moment of truth. So let's ask the real questions, the kind most people avoid. How much of your life are you spending doing what's urgent, but not important? How much of your attention is being dictated by people who don't live with the consequences of your choices? How many of your goals are being postponed because you keep choosing what's easy, familiar, or socially expected? And here's the biggest one. If your current habits continue exactly as they are for the next 12 months, where will you actually end up? If that answer bothers you, good. That discomfort is clarity knocking. This is the moment where you stop pretending that small compromises don't matter. They do. Every time you break your focus to answer something irrelevant. Every time you share a plan instead of working on it. Every time you check in with the world before checking in with yourself, you're teaching your brain to prioritize chaos over clarity. But this doesn't have to continue. You can interrupt the pattern. You can become someone who chooses with intention, who acts without over-explaining, who leads their day instead of being dragged by it. And it doesn't take a full reset. It just takes one moment, like this one, where you stop lying to yourself about how much control you actually have. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have every answer. You just need to be honest enough to see where your attention is costing you your potential. You don't need permission to refocus. You don't need permission to be unavailable to distractions. You don't need anyone to understand why you're choosing silence, structure, or simplicity. You just need to own it. That's where power lives. Because once you confront the gap between what you say matters and how you actually live, you can finally close it. This isn't about productivity. It's not about waking up earlier or getting more done. It's about who you become when you stop negotiating your focus. Because when you build in silence, you build something else most people never experience: self-respect. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to be seen, praised, or explained. The kind that grows in the dark, without noise, without applause, and then shows up in everything you do. You start to notice it in the way you walk into your day. No more frantic urgency. No more panic at the first notification. No more guilt from spending your energy in the wrong places. You begin with intention, not because the world got quieter, but because you did. And in that silence, you've recovered something most people lost: ownership of your energy, of your attention, of your identity. Because that's what all of this leads to: not just better results, but a stronger version of you. One that doesn't react impulsively. One that doesn't overshare, overthink, or over-explain. One that moves with quiet confidence, the kind built in discipline, not performance. You become someone who doesn't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You don't need approval to feel secure. You don't need momentum to stay committed. You begin showing up for yourself even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when no one notices. Because you've built the muscle of consistency, and with it, the foundation of identity. Covey often said that we must act based on values, not moods. And this is exactly what that looks like. You don't act based on how you feel. You act based on who you've decided to become. The distractions still exist, but they no longer direct you. The opinions still come, but they no longer control you. You begin to live from principle, not pressure. You become someone who protects peace the same way others protect their status. You walk away from conversations that don't align. You stop entertaining ideas that dilute your focus. And more importantly, you stop betraying yourself just to keep the world comfortable. You speak less, but say more. You react less, but do more. You expect less from others and require more from yourself. That shift from external to internal leadership changes everything. Because now, when you say, "I'm going to do this," it's not just a statement, it's a decision backed by action. And you follow through. Not because you feel like it, but because it's who you are now. You build trust with yourself. You keep promises others don't even know you made. And that trust compounds, just like the results. You become someone whose life runs on rhythm, not pressure. Someone who doesn't chase energy, but generates it. Someone who knows exactly what they're building and refuses to dilute it with noise. This is not about becoming rigid. It's about becoming rooted. Rooted in discipline. Rooted in clarity. Rooted in a standard of identity that doesn't shift with the circumstances. Because once you raise your standard for what gets your attention, everything else rises to meet it. Your work becomes sharper. Your relationships become healthier. Your time becomes sacred. And your inner world becomes stronger than your outer noise. That's when people start to notice, but by then, it doesn't matter. Because you've already proven it to yourself. Your success stops being public performance and becomes private alignment. Your peace stops being circumstantial and becomes non-negotiable. You don't just look focused, you are. And it shows in the way you show up. Not louder, not flashier, just undeniable. The results start compounding. Not because you finally found the secret, but because you stopped leaking your power. You're not chasing the next opportunity. You're cultivating the discipline to become the kind of person who doesn't need luck, because they lead with clarity. This is what happens when silence becomes part of your identity. You no longer fear being unseen, because you understand that what's built quietly becomes unshakable. You no longer seek to be understood, because you've chosen to be aligned. And that, more than anything, is what changes your life. Not what others give you, not what they say about you, but what you repeatedly choose about your time, your energy, and your identity. You've stopped chasing validation. You've stopped reacting to noise. You've stopped betraying your future for the comfort of being liked. You're no longer explaining. You're becoming. You don't need another breakthrough. You need fewer distractions. You don't need another plan. You need fewer compromises. You don't need to be louder, faster, or more impressive. You just need to become more aligned. Everything you've heard in this video leads to one simple truth. Your life moves in the direction of your dominant attention. And right now, the world is full of noise competing for it. Not because it's meaningful, but because it's available. Because it's addictive. Because it knows that if it can steal your focus, it can slow your future. But it doesn't have to win. Not today. Not anymore. Because now you know better. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the cost. And more importantly, you've remembered your power to interrupt it. This is not about control. This is about stewardship. Stewardship of your time, your energy, your thoughts, your presence. Things most people give away casually. But not you. Not anymore. You've seen what happens when you let the noise lead. Confusion grows. Progress stalls. You start becoming a version of yourself you don't recognize, always available, always tired, always behind. But when you choose silence, everything shifts. Silence becomes more than absence. It becomes authority. It becomes clarity. It becomes your return to what matters. When you step away from the noise, you start hearing your own priorities again. When you stop reacting to the world, you start responding to your own vision. When you stop explaining yourself, you start respecting yourself. That's when life begins to reorganize. Not because the world changes, but because you did. Because suddenly your calendar reflects your values. Your conversations reflect your direction. Your actions reflect your identity. And it's all quiet. No performance. No announcement. No applause needed. Just consistent action and powerful results. The kind of results that don't need to be defended. Because they're visible. They're undeniable. They're earned. And here's the truth that no algorithm, no opinion, no platform can take away from you. You don't rise by being seen. You rise by being steady. You rise by being whole. You rise by being focused when no one's watching. This is how lives change. Not with one dramatic decision, but with 1,000 quiet ones. Saying no to what doesn't align. Saying yes to what does. And repeating that rhythm until it becomes who you are. There's no shortcut here. There's no hack. But there is something far better. Self-respect. Build in silence. Live through consistency. Reinforce through identity. And it begins the moment you stop outsourcing your focus. This is the shift. From scattered to steady. From visible to valuable. From noise to depth. From pressure to purpose. That shift is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. Grounded. Unshakable. It happens at 5 a.m. When you move before the world wakes up. It happens at 9 p.m. When you say no to one more scroll and choose rest. It happens in meetings where you don't defend your boundaries, you just keep them. It happens in moments when you want to quit, but you don't. And slowly, your life becomes something else. Not faster, not easier, but real, built on principle, driven by clarity, protected by silence. Because now you're not performing, you're living. And as you continue, you'll find something else even more powerful. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from finally living in alignment. Peace that doesn't need approval. Peace that isn't shaken by opinion. Peace that grows every time you choose the quiet path, the disciplined path, the focused path again and again. That kind of peace doesn't need to be explained. It just is. And once you find it, you'll never trade it again. So stop performing. Stop reacting. Stop explaining. Focus. Build. And let your life, not your words, be the evidence. Because when you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything doesn't just fall into place by accident. It falls into place because you placed it. With intention. With consistency. With strength. And now, it's your time. If this message found you at the right moment, subscribe now. And if you're ready to keep building in silence, watch the next video in the playlist. Keep going. Quietly. Relentlessly. Unapologetically.